Well, hello everyone. It's Dorn Zinger again, and in this presentation, I'm going to briefly talk about how you might use Equip to evaluate and assess how well lessons are aligned to the NGSS standards. And we're going to focus on one component of Equip for this particular presentation. So one of the challenges with NGSS is um, the standards have become much more complex than they used to be, as you're well aware of. And rather than students just knowing particular things, we now need to connect practices to core ideas and cross-cutting concepts. And if lessons don't do this, then in many respects, kids aren't going to experience NGSS as we would like them to. So lots of folks have come up with lots of different ways of trying to make this happen. And again, as you can see from here, it's somewhat complicated. And this doesn't even take into account some of the common core pieces that also need to align with all of this. And even more challenging for us as teachers is then we start getting materials that say that they are NGSS aligned. And as some of you have already pointed out, sometimes things say that they're NGSS aligned, but really they are old materials that have been repackaged. So much like we want our students to be critical consumers of information, we ought to be critical consumers of information when it comes to NGSS alignment. And in some cases, it's not just a question of is it aligned or is it not aligned, but sometimes there might be useful things in there that are not necessarily entirely aligned and then we can modify. So I'm going to focus on one area, but I will mention two in this presentation. And as you work through this, I think this will make sense to you. And I'm going to focus on the focal phenomenon and the core standards. And the reason I'm going to focus on those for this presentation, and I encourage you to, as you begin looking at materials, do the same, is we know from research that if a lesson initially, as it's set up, does not have these two pieces, it's unlikely that kids will experience science in the way that we really want them to. So with focal phenomenon, and this is directly from the Equip rubric, it's explaining a phenomenon or designing a solution. The lesson focuses on supporting students to make sense of phenomenon or designing solutions to a problem. And I would say even beyond that, it's really a problem that exists in their own worlds rather than something that is remote to them. And I will touch on this here, but as we look at a couple of lessons, I will leave that to you. But the 3D component of NGSS is really the critical change from the prior standards. And often we see lessons or units that do attend to disciplinary core ideas, but they don't attend to the practices or the cross-cutting curricula and the cross-cutting concepts as we would like them to. So please be mindful that these three are probably the most critical pieces of this. And if they're not there, then the likelihood of the lesson succeeding diminish significantly. So to help us with this is achieve.org, and I will move out of this presentation and show you this and show you how you can kind of see some models of this. All right, so let me put up this window. And when you go to the achieve.org website, they have lots and lots of different things that you may find useful for other stuff. But I'm going to focus on our initiatives, Equip. I'm going to look for tools by subject, and I'm going to look at science. When I come here, you'll see that they have the rubric, which is very similar to the rubric, identical to the rubric that you've already looked at, but I'm going to look at these examples and also note that they have training materials and other things here. And when I look at this, you'll see that I can have some ways of sorting, but I'm going to focus on these first two right here, grade 1 and grade 2, which I know some of you teach. So how does light help me see things and communicate with others. If I click on that, I can download all of the materials. And I'm going to look at their peer-reviewed panel feedback in just a second. But I want to draw your attention to this commentary up here. And you'll note that many of these lessons are not necessarily exceptional lessons, but they work as great models for you to look at and potentially evaluate. So what it says is this unit is shared here is a good example of students making sense of a phenomena driving learning. And as you continue through, you'll see that their critique is the cross-cutting concepts and how those are not necessarily being addressed. So let's take a look at the actual rubric. And again, you'll see this is a very long document. And as you move through your own evaluation, you can see that some of these pieces will be helpful to you later. And you'll also see here that this particular lesson that was turned in is actually missing some components. But on the whole, you'll see that it says that this lesson is actually now ready to be fully reviewed. When we look at the focal phenomena, you'll see that they gave it an adequate score. And again, this seems like a pretty good focal phenomena. How does light help me see things and communicate with others? You'll note that overall, in the 3D section, they give it an inadequate score, and part of that is because of the cross-cutting concept. What is most useful here is as you go through each set of these rubrics, they will give you very detailed feedback on specific pieces that are showing up or not showing up in those unit and lesson plans. And they will also have these great suggestions for improvement, which should be helpful for you in terms of looking at your own lessons. All right, so let's go ahead and get out of this one. And I will show you one more, which is why is our corn changing? And again, this could be an interesting lesson, especially in areas where there is farming. You'll see here that this is a better lesson overall, and you'll see that there's extensive evidence of focal phenomenon as well as the 3Ds. And again, this question to me seems like a really relevant one. But as we look through here, you'll see that even though they gave it an extensive score of 4, when I look down here, you'll see students may or may not have experienced a harvest of corn. And an interesting thing that you may find here is potentially you can replace this with something else that students might be familiar with, which is what they're suggesting. So again, what's nice about this website is it'll give you a bunch of tools and resources. It'll give you some sample lessons, but it will also give you these rubrics and scores that folks have already given these lessons, so that when you look at lessons that you may come across, you may find that these rubrics help you kind of assess those as well. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I hope you have a chance to explore all of the resources on this website, and you have fun equipping.